Merry Christmas, all you wonderful people, and whether you celebrate Christmas or not, I hope you have a great winter holiday and Happy New Year. In this video, I'm going to make these two sleds out of this single 8-foot long 2x6. Let me show you how I do it. Come on, let's go.
The first thing I did is cut a piece of the 2x6 at about 43 inches long. These are not precise measurements, instead simply what I thought looked good. I grabbed a 6 and a 5-inch sanding disc to mark curves on the ends of the piece for the fronts of the sled runners. I also marked my sled runner height at about 1.5 inches. Again, not precise, just what I thought would look good. From this piece, I'll be getting all 4 sled runners. It'll make a little more sense once I start cutting it. Over at the bandsaw, I'm starting with my 1/2 inch blade to just cut out the basic rough shape of the runners. Really, I'm just cutting the 2 templates out to make cutting the details easier. And don't throw out that middle piece as waste. We'll be using it later. In fact, this project will have very little waste from the 2x6. I swap out my bandsaw blade to a 1/4 inch blade, or maybe it was a 3/16 inch blade. Honestly, I don't remember. I used the smaller blade to cut out the curves because the 1/2 inch blade was simply not going to be able to do it. I try and stay as close to the line as I can, but you can see I'm not the best at the bandsaw, but I will get better. Now I jump over to my oscillating belt sander and I get all personal with it as I'm going to spend a good bit of quality time here. I sand down my lines and get a much better curve to the outside of my runner. Then I swap the belt to a cylinder and sand down the inside of the curve. This really took a while as my cuts on the bandsaw were not as close to the line as I would have liked. This wasn't the longest sanding task in this project, but I was here a bit. Now back to my bandsaw and back to my 1/2 inch blade to resaw each of these sled runners. I set my fence up so that I can rip each of the 2 sled runners I just shaped in half so that I end up with 4 runners. This is the key to being able to make 2 sleds from the single 2x6. If you don't have a bandsaw or a good way to do these resaws, then you can simply buy 2 1x6 boards. Back to the 2x6, I cut the remaining piece into 3 separate 17.25 inch pieces. Why 17.25 inches, you ask? That's a great question. It's because that was basically what I could get 3 equal lengths out of from the remaining piece. After I get further along, I learned I could have saved myself some work in the long run by cutting one of the pieces at 12 inches, but you'll see more about that later. Once I have these cut, I'm back to my bandsaw and resawing each of these pieces, leaving me 6 pieces at 17.25 inches. Hey, do you remember that middle piece from our initial cuts on the bandsaw? You know, when we cut out the basic rough shape of the runners and I told you not to throw it away as we'd be using it later? Well, it's later. Simply cut a rough curve on each side, then smooth it out on the belt sander, then resaw on the bandsaw so you end up with 2 pieces. Take those 6 pieces and rip them into 12 pieces, roughly 2 3/4 inches wide. These are going to be used for the sled seat and the seat risers. Once you have all 12 pieces at roughly 2 3/4 by 17.25, take 4 of those and then cut those down to a length of 12 inches. These will be used as the risers for the seat as well as setting the width of the sleds. This is where I mentioned earlier that one of those 17.25 inch pieces could have been cut at 12 inches. The pieces that will become the risers for the seat will also set the width of the sled. These will need to have notches cut out of them to allow the sled runners to fit into. Rather than measure, it's easier and more accurate to use relative measurements, so hold the pieces against the sled runners and mark the height and depth. Then, using a small square, mark the lines for each notch that needs to be cut out. Cut them out any way you can. I'm using my bandsaw, but this could be done with a jigsaw and actually quite easily and fast with a handsaw as well. All of the pieces are now cut and we can start to assemble the sleds. Because I'm painting the sled base red and staining the seat, I'm only going to assemble the base right now. I clamp the sled runners to the seat risers to set the width of the sled, then mark where the sled steering bar will go. I unclamp and transfer the mark to the other sled runner, then reclamp everything back up. Since this decoration may go outside, I'm using Titebond 3 to glue the steering bar to the runners as well as a few brad nails. Be sure to center the steering bar as best you can. As far as where to place the seat and the steering bar, I just use my eye to see what I like best. I don't want the grain and the knots to show through the paint, so I'm starting with a base coat of primer. I'd normally use my $100 HomeRite sprayer for this, but it's raining outside and I don't really have my garage set up for a nice spray booth, so I'm brushing it on. I really dislike painting. While the primer is drying, I move over to the seat and the seat risers. I'm going to be staining them. I had a little walnut colored stain left, so that's the color I'm using. I know that without a pre-stained conditioner, this wood will blotch some, but I'm not too worried about that, as I actually think that'll add a little bit of character to the old-timey type of sled. I grab a cotton cloth and start wiping it on generously. Once I get all of them covered, I start back at the first piece I stained and start to wipe off the stain. Probably could have left the stain on for another couple minutes or so before wiping it off, but I still liked what I saw. Now back to the sled base to give it the Monet treatment. Since it's still raining, I just glob a bunch of red paint on the brush and smush it around on the sled. I did 2 coats of red paint. Now to attach the seats to the sled. The placements are just what I thought looked good, so use whatever you want. But I set the back riser to 9 inches from the back and the front risers to 22 inches from the back. I should have taped off the placement of the risers before painting. That way I could have used glue, but I forgot, so I'm only using brad nails to attach the risers to the sled runners. From there, I get a flat piece of scrap so that I can use that to align all the seat pieces. Start with the 2 outside pieces, making them flush to the outside. For these, I'm using Titebond 3 and brad nails. Once the 2 outside pieces are attached, then just using your eye, space out the 2 inside pieces. Glue and nail them in place. Do this for both sleds. Folks, this is a very easy and inexpensive build. Once you do one set, I think you'd be able to batch out a few 2x6 boards into several sleds in a single day. Once you're done attaching the seats, you're done. After everything cured for a day or two, I did come back and add a couple coats of spray poly, as I think that will help more if these are placed outside, but this is really optional.
Well, here they are, and I am really happy with them. I think these came out looking awesome and are going to make great Christmas decorations. And remember, both from a single 8-foot 2x6. Like I said, I kind of had all of this in my head, so now that I've made a set, the next set will be much easier and much faster. These are a pretty quick build. Without a doubt, the majority of time spent was in sanding and painting. Doing this again, the 3 major things I would do differently would be, the first thing I'd do is after resawing all of the boards, I would take that cut side with all the little bandsaw marks and I'd run those through the planer, taking off the smallest amount I possibly can to keep the thickness, but that would save me so much time sanding. The second thing that I would do is set up some sort of a spray booth in my garage. Normally, I'll take my work outside, I'll do all the spraying out there, no problem. But we were socked into 3 or 4 days of pure rain and I couldn't do that. I should have taken the time to set up a spray booth in the garage, but I didn't. Instead, I pulled out the paintbrush and that just takes forever. And that is really the thing I hate most. I despise painting. I think the time that I would have used setting up some sort of a spray booth inside of my garage would have ultimately saved me time over the entire project, as spraying these would have taken almost no time at all, but using the brush, It just seemed to take forever. And again, I didn't do the best of jobs because I just don't like it. The third thing that I'll do is get better on my bandsaw. My bandsaw skills aren't great. I don't use it a ton, but I am using it more and more. I just need to get better at it. The better I would have been at my bandsaw skills and the cuts that I made, the less sanding I would have had to do. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with these yet. I may keep them, I may give them away, I may sell them on Marketplace. If I do sell them on Marketplace, I'm thinking $30 each or maybe both for $55. What do you think? Let me know down in the comments if you think I have the price set right, too low, or too high. Either way, I hope you all have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And until next time, see ya.